For 5 minutes. Okay, Mr. Giovanni, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to direct my questions to Mr. Party. Mr. Party, I think what we've seen sort of on display in some of the comments made today at this meeting is a certain logic that has informed the legislation that you've referenced, Bill C-11, C-18, C-63. And that logic seems to be people pointing to problems in society, suggesting that the expansion of the federal bureaucracy is somehow the necessary solution to those problems, not really making a case for the efficacy of that bureaucracy, but nonetheless saying that the bureaucracy must grow and that the Canadian taxpayer must pay for that growth. I'd like for you to speak to your concerns related to the expansion of the federal bureaucracy, and in particular, I'm referencing some of your writing on the growth of the administrative state.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. I agree with the premise of your question 100%. We have mangled the idea of rights, such as those in the Charter of Rights. They're supposed to be negative rights, meaning that they are rights against government interference. If the government does not interfere with you, then your rights are being observed. And we have this idea in this country that there are rights that we need the government's help to achieve. We need the government to intervene in this, to impose on that. This group asks for the government to make that group stop saying things about this group because that's not right. That's not the conception of rights that we were supposed to have. The conception we're supposed to have is if the government leaves you alone, then your rights are being observed. It is when the government intervenes that is the problem. And you can see that reflected in the comments and the submissions here. But yes, to your larger point, we have a government that has grown beyond its useful limits. The public sector, by some estimates, I saw the other day an estimate that said that the public sector has grown to 40% of the economy of this country. Okay, that is not sustainable. That is one of the reasons that this country is becoming poor. You need more people than that in the private sector to make it possible to have a government. We think that money grows on trees and that the government is the solution to everything. And we're in that trap so deep that we cannot see anything else, that whenever there's a problem, that the only possible solution is more, not less, government programs, rules, taxes, structures. Sometimes, if not always, in this day and age, the solution is less, not more.
This in our broader conversation about freedom of expression, how would you articulate to the average Canadian citizen why hearing people in Ottawa talk so cavalierly about expanding the footprint of the state may be a danger to people being free to articulate themselves, particularly around things where they might disagree with the government and want to be able to express those views?
Yes, well, we're approaching a society in which the government runs the show, period. I mean, it's happened to us slowly and insidiously. It's grown without, actual revolution or anything. It's the way public authorities spread their influence. It happens over time. We have had an administrative state for many, many years, but it's now as big as it has ever been. And by the way, the administrative state is not provided for in our Constitution. It's not prohibited, but it's not provided for. And so the fundamental ideas like the separation of powers between legislature and executive and courts now has been more or less practically been put by the wayside. And the bureaucracy now more or less runs the show. And if you think that you live in a free country and the bureaucracy actually runs the show, then you are mistaken. The greatest threat to our liberty now is the administrative state.
There's a line you wrote in an article for the National Post that I'd like to ask you to elaborate on, where you wrote, "We trusted that these institutions," and in institutions you're referring in part to the administrative state, "would commit to their own restraint. We have been tragically naive." Can you comment on what restraint means in this context? And again, for the purposes of the freedom of expression, why people need to be concerned about trusting the administrative state to be restrained in its use of power?
Thank you, Mr. Giovanni. I'm glad you came back to the topic at hand, and because we were moving away from it.
The entire
Good.
time, actually.
Okay, please, I'll ask the witness to stick to the topic at hand. Thank you.
We've been talking about the topic at hand. You're wrong.
Please, can you go ahead and answer the question?
You're editorializing.
Yeah. So the rule of law is an idea, and the idea is that the state is restrained in all kinds of ways, including the way it restrains our speech. But the rule of law depends upon the people in charge believing in the idea. And now they don't. Now they don't believe the state should be restrained. Now they think the solution to everything is the state. And so when you have conflicts between people who disagree, they both want the state to intervene and make the other guy stop speaking. And
thank you very much. We have gone a minute over time, Mr. Giovanni. I'm going to go to the Liberals. Ms. Dillon, for 5 minutes, please, Ms. Dillon.
Thank you. My first question is for Mr. Purdy. You appeared last week at the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research and spouted talking points from the Great Replacement Theory. This rhetoric has inspired attacks around the world and has been very dangerous. How do you think such testimony from a largely debunked conspiracy theory is useful for freedom of expression?
You are mistaken, madam. I did not talk about that at all. My submission to that committee was that federal research funding should be abolished. It had nothing to do with anything you're talking about.
You stated it during your testimony.
Tell me what I said.
You were saying that this theory is something that is supposed to be helpful in freedom of expression, in getting government out of freedom of expression. My other question to you is, you do know government helped.
You've accused me of something.
Excuse me, order, please. Miss Dillon, thank you. Finish your question.
That's it for this witness. I have Mrs. Dufresne. I'm going to ask questions too. We're hearing a lot of testimony about.
Well, I think
you made it very clear in earlier comments that that there was latitude given to the witnesses to answer. So I'd expect the same treatment amongst.
I didn't make it clear that there was latitude. Witnesses cannot go beyond the scope of the study when they're answering. I have allowed a lot of blue skying to go on here, and I've done that because but I'm sorry, Mr. Giovanni, I'm speaking. Mr. Giovanni, I am speaking. When I finish, you may say what you wish to say. I will turn to you for your comment. So I think what we're doing is that the witness was asked a question. He challenged the questioner on it, and she has decided not to continue the question and is moving to someone else. So I think the witnesses have had an opportunity to respond to the accusation by the MP. Now, you wanted to say something, Mr. Giovanni.
Yes, I think you're doing a lot of editorializing as our chair and inserting your opinion into the administration of this meeting. Thank you.
As chair, I can make sure we stay on topic. That's my job. My job. I don't see how the administration of government and the budget has anything to do with this.
You don't see how expanding the federal government's power over freedom of expression is relevant?
When I'm speaking, Mr. Giovanni, allow me to finish, then I will allow you to say what you have to say. So allow me to finish. I think that there has been a lot of blue skying going on here where we talked about budgets and amount of money being spent, etc. That is not on topic. It's about freedom of expression. That can go into all kinds of corners, and I've allowed people to do that because it is pertinent to freedom of expression. And when Mr. Pardee has answered about freedom of expression, I've let him go into the corners he wishes to go in. That's what this is about. But we're not discussing a budget here, and I allowed that to happen, but I'm not going to allow it to happen again. Budgeting for the government of Canada has got nothing to do with freedom of expression. And so I'm going to move forward to Ms. Dillon. You have the floor. Thank you.
This is absurd.
Madame Dufresne, my question
the Conservatives, for 5 minutes, please. Mr. Kurek.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be splitting my time with Mr. Giovanni. But Mr. Party, a fairly serious accusation was levied against you, and you didn't have a chance to respond. So I'd invite you now, and I would give you the opportunity to speak to that if you wish.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't think there's very much response required. The member accused me of talking about a topic that I didn't talk about at the meeting, and I wanted her to quote me the line that she thought was about that, and there isn't one. So as far as I'm concerned, she's off the mark.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Giovanni.
Thank you. Also, for Mr. Party, so the chair of this committee bizarrely suggested that the discussion we were having about the growth of the bureaucracy is irrelevant to Bill C11, C18, and C63. Could you maybe explain, for the benefit of everyone listening, why the conversation about the administrative state is important for these pieces of legislation related to freedom of expression?
It would be my pleasure. So that's what these three bills do. C11, C18, and in part C63, they grow the administrative state. They grow the bureaucracy. What these bills do is give powers to administrative bodies, to bureaucrats, to make rules. If you look in the statutes, you don't even know what the rules are. That's what we mean by the expansion of the administrative state. Our freedom of speech, our freedom to listen to what we want, is now in the hands of a bureaucracy. And that bureaucracy is not just enforcing the rules made by Parliament. Parliament instead has delegated their authority to that bureaucracy to decide what the rules are going to be. Okay? This is what I was alluding to when I said the disintegration of the separation of powers, the growth of the administrative state. Our rights are now in the hands not of Parliament, but in the hands of the bureaucrats to whom Parliament has delegated their authority. And in this and so many other ways, your freedom of speech is in peril. You don't even know what the rules are because those rules have not been made yet. They'll be made in a back corner, in a back room, not with the sunlight in the House of Commons, in the debate about what the rules ought to be. So C11 and C18, and to some extent C63, are all good illustrations of this trend and how our rights, including our right to free speech, are being eroded.
Thank you, Mr. Party, and I do hope every member of this committee paid attention closely to what you said. I thought it was an excellent explanation. Relatedly, what would you say to Canadians who are concerned about freedom of speech and why they should be concerned about so much power over what Canadians can see, say, and hear being controlled by unelected bureaucrats in Ottawa?
Well, yes, because it means that your rights don't mean anything. It means that your rights are dependent upon decisions made by unelected people that are not accountable to you or anybody else for that matter, right? You can't tell where the line is. When you go out online or in the streets and you know that you might be punished for something bad that you say, you don't know where the line is between hateful and offensive, that means your speech is chilled. If you live in a country where you have to think twice before you speak because you're concerned about getting into legal trouble, then you know you probably don't live in a free country.
Thank you, Mr. Party.
I will go to Mr. Waugh for 2 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. You know, a few years ago, I remember signing off on Canada's summer jobs when there was an attestation attached to it where certain organizations across the country were forced to make a decision, either steadfast, say, no, I don't believe in this, and we will not apply for Canada's summer jobs, or we will bear down and, decide as a group then that we, in fact, will sign the attestation even though we don't believe in it. So, Mr. Party, that was an example that I think, and we've heard a little bit about attestation. It was brought up here. And that's one example where government certainly, I think, overexceeded their boundaries on the Canada Summer Job, signing off on the attestation forms that affected so many people across this country and organizations that did not partake in Canada Summer Jobs. Your thoughts?
I totally agree. You know, the government today, the administrative state, works with carrots and with sticks. The sticks are prohibitions that will punish you if you misbehave. And the carrots are government benefits that they'll give you as long as you do what they say. And that is one way that they will control or try to control your speech. You know, you will sign on to this or you will not get an equal access to the benefits we are providing. Yes.
They got no benefits. If you didn't sign on, you weren't eligible for the Canada Summer Jobs. There was no gray
30
area.
seconds.
It was no gray area. It was either you sign or don't get it. So
That's right. No, that's exactly so. So that is an indirect form of compelled speech in my books. That ought to be a no-no, as far as I'm concerned.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin.